How are we doing today, guys?
Good.
It's Wednesday, so everybody's like, yeah, yeah. And Matt, you're gonna feel it. I'm gonna talk about it a lot, and then you're gonna start feeling it's like, you know what, Dr. Barnes is right about Wednesdays. He's so wise, you know. Do you know why I'm wise? Because I'm very old. That's why. Okay.
Does
Yes.
this have anything to do with you just have a bunch of meetings on Wednesday?
That has part of it. So here's an interesting one. I actually have two meetings today. They're scheduled at the same time. And a former professor here said the best meeting is the one that gets you out of another meeting, you know. And so my dean has scheduled a meeting for today, and I said I can't attend. He says, it's really important. Can you attend? Can you get out of it? He says, well, I'm in charge of the other meeting, so no, I really can't get out of it. You know, I have to actually conduct the other meeting. So I'm not talking trash about my dean. Dr. Prasad is great, you know, but yeah, he says it's one of those things that there's such a priority for time. But the problem is that when you reach a certain level, you pretty much have meetings every afternoon. Like I think yesterday afternoon, well, actually no, every afternoon with the exception of Friday. Friday I actually get off, which is kind of a blessing. Sometimes you don't get off on Fridays, but you guys will learn to hate meetings as much as I do. I guarantee it. I will pass that. I will pass that on to you guys, you know, and then I'll call you in the office for a meeting and says, do we really have to do this, Dr. Barnes? And I said, that's the right answer. That's the right.
My husband started his first full-time job, and oh my gosh, I'm finding out just how awful meetings are.
Well, so when you're doing like an hourly position, you're just kind of like, well, this is great. I get something that can take the place of the meeting. So like when you get a salary position, it's like if you have a meeting, that means that's time that you don't spend working. So you're gonna have to spend the time later catching up on that work. And that's my opinion about meetings. Today I want to talk a little bit. There's a couple things about today's lecture that I think are important to note. So first of all, question always comes up, this is going to be on the exam, maybe one or two multiple choice questions. I'm going to try to stick to the articles themselves and not so much the slides that I'm about to show you, because first of all, some of the slides are pretty goofy. But I do think this is one of those things that I like to point out. If I had my perfect ideal world, this is how I would conduct a class. It would not be, hey guys, write all this information down or pay very close attention to the slides and take notes and that this is going to be on the exam or this is going to be on a quiz. I don't like exams. I don't like quizzes. The reason I have to give them is because they tell me I have to. And to be fair, I did try to do a graduate class without exams a long time ago, and it didn't work out well. Basically, everybody was kind of like, oh, so this entire class I can just browse the internet. I can get on social media and talk about how boring this class is. I don't know that my students did that, but so I do like classes like this. Hopefully you engage in this. The goal of this is to actually go back to the core of learning. And the idea originally was learning is people did it because they wanted to, not because they were trying to get a degree. They wanted to actually learn something. I'm a big advocate for learning new things just because you want to learn new things, not because it's forced upon you, not because I'm shoving AIS down your throat. You're going to find that these things we're going to talk about today, they're very loosely related to AIS and accounting, but I still think they're relevant and important, and they provide context for why what we're learning in this course is so important. The second thing I'm going to tell you is I do think that learning on your own is very beneficial. You don't have to go to the extreme that I do. I particularly back during the pandemic, I kind of went off the deep end. I was like listening to podcasts all the time, and basically I just always had my iPad or my one of those the little headphones, the Bluetooth headphones in my ear, and I was just had podcasts running nonstop and just trying to learning stuff. And I kind of got over that really quickly, but I still try to follow up. I still try to get at least some sort of source of information. And you know, when I say information, use that term loosely. It doesn't have to be Wall Street Journal. It doesn't have to be just truly what actual news is. You can actually get it through a number of different sources. I tend to go on Yahoo News, and you have to filter that a little bit. Some of the stuff on Yahoo News is really good. Apparently, I've got cookies on all of my computers that tell them that I'm a big fan of Kanye West, because there seem to be a lot of articles about Kanye. And I'll be honest, I know a little bit about Kanye West. I've heard maybe one or two of his songs, but you know, he was like married to one of the Kardashians. And yeah, apparently just like every time there's a Kanye West article, there's like spams my news feed with it. It's just kind of like, okay, I don't know what I did, but apparently they've got the wrong demographic here. So you do have to filter that out. I also listen to a podcast every morning. It's like 10-minute podcast and news podcast. I encourage you to do that, not for this course. This is just to improve yourself as a human being, to actually, you know, get your mindset into thinking about the way the world works. And you'll find that it actually starts to eliminate a lot of cognitive biases that exist in your life if you start listening to multiple perspectives and start exposing yourself to this information. Now for this was somewhat limited because I had to actually talk about things that were related to accounting and information systems. And so what you're going to find is that some of these are very direct. Like the second article, you'd be like, what on earth does this have to do with accounting? And I promise you, I will get to that, okay? You'd be like, school bus routes, Dr. Barnes has gone off the deep end. He says, yes, you're right. I went off the deep end a long time ago. But the good news is I have tenure, so it doesn't matter, okay? So yeah, the second article is very loosely related to it, but it still has some points. But I do want to talk a little bit about these just generally because I think there's some interesting insights to be gleaned about business, about accounting, about the way the world works, and particularly about this thing that kind of is on the cusp of technology that we're all really worried about, artificial intelligence. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And there's some reassurances, but some cautions that I want to throw at you with respect to artificial intelligence. Before we get to that, though, let's go ahead and talk about this first article. So this first article was about the Pentagon accounting error. And it was actually from mid-June. They allowed them to provide $6.2 billion for Ukraine military aid. Now, I'm not criticizing that part because that's a political argument that I don't want to get into. I don't want to criticize. Personally, I think that it's beneficial that we're able to provide more aid, and I was a fan of that. But I was more interested in the first part of the article where it says, how did they actually have an oversight of $6.2 billion? I mean, occasionally I'll open my wallet and says, oh, I've got an extra $5 bill in here. That seems great, okay? I've never opened my wallet and said, oh, an extra $6.2 billion. This is fantastic, okay? So did anybody read the article and closely scrutinize why there was $6.2 billion? It wasn't that they didn't have that they just basically found the cash lying in a pile. That was not what the article said. It actually gave a specific reason why it was 6.2 billion more. What was the reason behind that?
Used replacement costs instead of value.
Right. Very good. Okay. And I think that that's an interesting insight. So the Pentagon was using replacement cost of value, the cost of its I don't know what you would call this, the arsenal, the whatever the goods they were holding. And so they're using replacement cost, which is basically saying, what do we have to pay if we want to replace this at some point in the future? Now, go back to when you first learned accounting back in 220 or whatever original financial accounting course you took, and you were taught this very simple rule about any information that's on the balance sheet. All of the items held on the balance sheet are held at what type of cost? Starts with the letter H. Starts with the letter HIS. Historical, there we go. I was going to spell the whole word out if I needed to. Yeah, all right. So historical cost, all right. And that is kind of the rule that you followed. Now, do we think that that's a reasonable decision rule for everything that we do in accounting? I think so, because it makes things pretty simple. It's like, okay, whatever I bought it at, that's what I keep it on the books. But think about this logically. Is that a reasonable decision rule for everything in life? Do you buy something and just say, okay, this is what I assume its value is whatever I paid for it? Has anybody ever gone to a garage sale and bought $5, paid $5 for a chair and says, that's my $5 chair, and then you proudly talk about it, or go on eBay or go on some auction site and pay low price for something? Intuitively speaking, if you purchase something, you assign your own value to it, right? All right. It doesn't matter what you paid for it, you actually assign your own value. And there's also this trade-off if the value is too high. Like, say, for example, you think bananas are worth $1 a pound, and you go to the grocery store and they're selling it for $2 a pound. Are you going to buy the bananas? No. Okay. What if the bananas are $1 a pound? Will you buy them? Yes, that's exactly the amount. Okay. What if they're 50 cents a pound? Yeah, then you're getting a bargain. But does that intuitively change your valuation of bananas? If they're sold at 50 cents, are you going to say these bananas are worse than the bananas I'm having to pay $2 a pound for? I mean, maybe if you live in a big city and you're going to shop over Whole Foods, and it's like, nah, I'm paying for $2 bananas. Come on now. Yeah. No, so basically you've got an intuitive measure that what you think is. And the reason this is important is that we tried to solve this problem in accounting and business a long time ago. All right. So let's just go ahead and just do a reset. And I got some slides here that are created. These are not on the website. These are very informal slides, as you're about to see. Okay. So this first part's kind of about accounting theory. So what do we say traditional accounting valuation was? Is that historical cost? We can also call that entry value. And entry value just basically means whatever you paid for it up front, whatever the cost was up front. Now, what are some other items or some other options that we have? Okay, well, we had a few different options that we talked about. So we could talk about exit value, what you could sell it for. Okay, replacement cost, that was the focus of our article. We could actually say what does it cost us to replace this? What about discounted cash flows? Have you guys ever heard that before? I got finance majors in the rooms that just kind of like, of course, Dr. Barnes, discounted cash flows. That's how I live my life. Yeah. So that's how pricing of equity and how pricing of debt often works is what the discounted cash flows are. That's how we value. And you guys have actually done this before. Remember back in 221 when you're doing present or the time value of money and you were trying to calculate net present value. That was just a simplified form of discounted cash flows. So are all these reasonable alternatives to historical cost? And the answer should be, it's like you're gonna say, no, Dr. Barnes, because you're gonna make us learn this, and I'm not comfortable with that. It's like, no, I'm not making you learn all these. That's not the point here. That's not the goal. I'm asking you just an intuitive question. Could all these be considered reasonable alternatives? Obviously, the Pentagon thinks so because they actually valued at one of these, even though the traditional accounting model says, no, you're supposed to use historical cost. All right. So there was this man here, and his name is Maurice Muniz. And I've got to say, this is an archive picture of Maurice Muniz, and he just looks like an accountant, doesn't he? Yeah, you just look at this guy, so that guy's an accountant. This guy's not just an accountant, he was the accountant. Like, if you make the list of famous accountants, you got like Luca Pacioli, who's the father of accounting, and you got Maurice Muniz as like number 2, okay? So he was a professor at Ohio State University. And back in the 1940s, he was tasked with kind of figuring out accounting rules. Because before 1940, accounting was just basically make up your own rule for every organization. Organizations treated accounting rules differently. And we can go back and look at financial statements from the 20s and 30s, and they look nothing alike. Like, even though you hate to read a 10K nowadays, even if you like open up a 10K and just like, oh my gosh, this is misery. You know, you can compare 10Ks across different organizations, and at least there's some similarities. They call the sales the net revenue, or they call them revenues or sales, but they're measurably consistent. They use the same account types. That wasn't the case back in the 1930s and 40s. And so this guy was basically saying, all right, I'm going to make some hard and fast accounting rules. And some of the stuff that he did exists in today. We do have some consistency, but he tried to go a little bit too far, and he tried to say, let's actually get to the core of accounting. Let's actually say different types of accounts should be treated differently for valuation purposes. And one of his arguments is like, some things we should hold at replacement cost value. Okay, some things we should hold replacement cost value, because they're going to be sold very quickly. So the value is not what we bought it for, but what we're going to have to replace it for. Some things should be held at discounted cash flow value. Think about fixed assets. Why do organizations own fixed assets? It's like because they want to buy a building because it looks nice. It's like yeah, that's good. It matches the landscape out there. Okay, I'm really, really happy with this building. What's the purpose of buying a building? Got to have some place to do your manufacturing or to do your operations. So it's actually in something that you utilize for the process of generating revenues, right? So how can we actually determine what the cash flows are going to be with a fixed asset? Well, what types of revenues does it generate? We can actually discount those over time. So that's the way he justified accounting. Now, there was a problem with that. And again, keep in mind, this is the 1940s, I think maybe early 1950s when this finally started getting scrutinized. 1940s, 1950s. There was a problem with that. So basically the people at the time, they made an argument saying that this was not additive, that you could not take numbers that were used and measured on different bases and add them together. What they were really saying when they made that argument is this is way too complex for us to do for every single account. Think about this way. If you had sat in 220 and whoever taught you 220, Dr. Eisen, Dr. Deers, whoever was your 220 instructor says out there, it's like said, all right, we're going to learn one set of rules for your first set of accounts, okay? Once you guys have learned that set of rules, we're going to go to different accounts and we're going to learn a different set of rules. And we're going to keep doing that for the entire semester. Would you guys gotten frustrated really, really quickly? Yeah, probably so. Which is why we have historical cost. Intuitively speaking, historical cost makes no sense because historical cost is not an accurate valuation of how we treat something. But what is it? It is simple, all right? It's simple and straightforward, it's consistent. Now, before we leave this topic, I want to say, has something changed between the 1940s and 2020s that we can actually point out and say, this may be something we need to consider? Well, population is growing, Dr. Barnes, so obviously that's a big one. We're no longer in the middle of a world war. That's true. Okay, all right. What's one big change that we can actually point out? We can say, this is a massive change from 1940 to 2020. 80 years ago, we didn't have what? Yeah, we had technology, but we didn't have the advanced technology we have right now. We've got computers. All right. Has anybody watched The Imitation Game? Yeah. Great movie, by the way. Yeah, so fantastic. We had a computer back then, the Turing machine. He didn't call it a computer, it was a Turing machine. But we had a very, very basic form of computer. But nowadays, computing power is very, very powerful. Very, very ever present, very, very powerful. Could we say that if we could actually do some of the things that Muniz was prescribing, if we just put it in computers and had computers handle the work for us? Yeah, all right. It would make 220 a lot more challenging because you'd have to actually learn a whole bunch of different rules. But will we say that's a better representation of business and accounting valuation if we actually did these things that he was prescribing back then? Possibly. So what I wanted you to get out of this article is like, obviously this was a very, very simple oversight because they should have been doing historical cost. But question this a little bit more. It's like, maybe we should think about what would happen if we actually started utilizing these methods, utilizing computers, because we have the computing power to do it right now. The problem is that we're still mired in the past about what we've done, what we did 80 years ago, that we're not really changing. We're not really updating these things. And so that's something to consider. Now, again, this is just to put the seed in your mind. I don't want you to rush out of this room and say, all right, I'm completely and totally changing the world of accounting right now, okay? I want you to think about this like 5-10 years down the line and working for a company that says, I remember Dr. Barnes talking about this. Maybe we could consider a new valuation system that would better represent our organization. The change is not going to happen right now, not at this moment, unless one of you has a much bigger sphere of influence than I really come to realize, that you're a Truman student, but you're also on the board of Amazon. You know, is anybody on the board at Amazon here? Okay, I threw out my shot. I didn't expect it to happen, but there. All right, so let's talk about the next article, and we're going to talk about these kind of two articles jointly. So before we do that, again, the next article is about technology, very loosely. It doesn't actually have to do with accounting, but it does have something that's very closely adjacent to accounting in business, and something you guys are going to hear a lot about in your upcoming careers, and has to do with artificial intelligence. And so this was a kind of interesting technology piece. So the very first thing I'm going to caution you about is be very, very careful when it comes to trusting AI. And I'm not just saying that because I don't want you guys to go to ChatGPT to do your assignments, okay? Now, if you do, beware. So here's some of the things that happen with ChatGPT. Now, to be fair, this is like 6 months to a year old, but some of the stuff that's going on, all right? So one of the first ones, this was actually a colleague that was in a Facebook chat of mine, because when I'm on Facebook, obviously I talk about accounting. Like everybody does. But there's a colleague who actually got in a ChatGPT and said, all right, how do you actually purchase equipment for cash? Okay, counting by equipment cash, what do you credit? And so ChatGPT was very, very firm about this. It says, yes, you are going to debit cash and you're going to credit equipment. And that's how you do this journal entry, okay? I see nobody's laughing, so apparently everybody thinks this is correct. ChatGPT said it, so it must be true. So let's go back to 220, okay? When you make a purchase for cash, all right, do you debit cash? No, what does a debit to cash imply? You're receiving cash, okay? So ChatGPT completely got this all wrong, okay? Now, I actually asked ChatGPT the same question recently, and it did get the right answer. So even though it's not really true generative AI, it does learn from its mistakes, all right? That being said, let's do another one, okay? Let's do another one. I can't, this is in the way, get out of the way. All right. I need to depreciate land. What's the journal entry? So ChatGPT, to its credit, it was very, very firm about this. When it says, okay, debit accumulated depreciation, land account, credit the land account. Okay, so debit accumulated depreciation. So first of all, let's just talk about one of the basic mistakes. Accumulated depreciation is called a contra asset account. What does that mean? Again, I know I'm giving you flashbacks from 220, but this is important stuff. You got to be able to read accounting. So what's a contra asset account? So a contra asset account, does it have a debit or a credit balance? Credit balance. So accumulated depreciation should be debited. But there's a much bigger problem with this, okay? A much bigger problem that shouldn't even be relevant, okay? So property, plant, and equipment. Do we depreciate property, plant, and equipment? Yes, except for land. We don't depreciate land, okay? It was a trick question and ChatGPT completely fell for it, okay? Yeah, said, okay, here's how you depreciate land. It gave the wrong journal entry even if you did depreciate land, but it tried its best, okay? If you could depreciate this, obviously debit depreciation expense, credit accumulated depreciation, but you can't depreciate land. So the journal entry should have just come back a blank screen. That's what ChatGPT should have said. Again, I asked ChatGPT more recently. It got the right answer, so it does learn. There's actually a story about this. ChatGPT sat for the CPA exam, okay, and it got a 35. Okay, passing on the CPA exam, by the way, is a 75. Okay, so I got a 35, but then it learned from its mistakes and it actually passed with flying colors on the second attempt. All right, so there's that. All right, this next one is not really about the foibles of ChatGPT. Actually, is a really good example, but I could not resist. I got to ChatGPT. I finally got access to it, and so I said, "All right, what am I going to do with this amazing piece of technology that will change the world? And I said, you know what? I'm going to refer to a Wall Street Journal article. So ChatGPT will ever change the profession of auditing. And so I said, explain agency theory to me in the style of a pirate. Now you think that I'm making this up, okay, that I actually would do this, that I say, why would somebody post this? Okay, why would somebody ask agency theory in style of a pirate? I can prove that I asked this. Here's what ChatGPT said. And I will tell you right now, it's actually amazing. It did a really good job on this, okay? So for those of you who don't know, agency theory basically tells us there's a separation of interest between owners and operators of an organization, and you have to align the incentives of the organization, all right? They basically said the captain and the crew are separate entities and they have different things. Like the captain wants to get back safe to port, but the crew may just want to get their hands on riches. All right. And it used pirate language too. That was the best part. Okay. All right. It used pirate language. So you can actually have a lot of fun with ChatGPT and learn something at the same time. So that's actually an interesting tool that you have available to you. All right, and plus it really amused it. The funny part was the comments after this, people were just kind of like, "This is actually really, really good." And one of my colleagues says, "You know, you could polish this up and publish this." And it's like, you know, if it was my work, I absolutely would do it. But unfortunately, this is something else. So yeah. All right, so there's that. Let's go ahead and let's talk about the second article now. So the second article is tech company behind Kentucky school bus problems had similar issues to Ohio last year. Now, this is not talking about the school bus crash in Ohio. I'm not that morbid. This is actually talking about some delays that occurred in Kentucky. And so if you read the article, it was saying, look, what was, I don't remember, it's like Alpha Route was the name of the organization, the name of the company. This company came in and it was going to say, it's going to revolutionize the way the school busing works. And we're going to actually fix the problems that you have, and you won't have to use as many routes, because part of this they actually said, and they alluded to this article, is there is a massive shortage of drivers for school buses right now. And that makes perfect sense because if you look at anything in the news, one of the big shortages we're starting to see is in transportation sector. And for long haul trucking transportation, that type of transportation, they're raising their salaries massively. So people in this industry are trying to gravitate towards that. There's also Uber, there's also Lyft that actually are alternative forms that have a lot more flexibility. So they're having a hard time trying to actually attract people to this because it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like they want more people there, but they can't offer very high salaries because, of course, it's an education sector. And you know, when you deal in public education, then the price there, the payment there kind of sucks. You know. By the way, you will hear me say that occasionally. I'm a big fan of teachers. I'm a big fan of anybody who works in public education. I come from Oklahoma, which is like almost dead last when it comes to payment of teacher salaries. And it's just kind of pathetic to see what happens there. So I'm not disparaging in any way. I understand the problems they're facing. The problem also is that what we really need is more taxes, and nobody wants to pay more taxes. So especially when it comes to something that's just kind of arbitrary as education, because nobody needs education. That was sarcasm. That was sarcasm, guys. That was sarcasm. All right. All right. So yeah, they're having problems. So they basically said, let's solve this with artificial intelligence. And it did not go well. What the ultimate line in this article was, that something that you should take away is that not all problems can be solved using technology and using these advanced technology tools. I actually made a joke about this to my friends yesterday. I'm about to do a massive foundation repair in my house, which, by the way, if you buy a house and then have to have foundation repair, get ready for a very large dollar amount. Okay, that's the amount that you're gonna have to pay. I was looking at the bill and he just kept adding zeros. Okay, just kept adding zeros. So I was like saying, why can't AI fix this problem? This is the one that I really need AI to fix, is to actually fix the foundation of my house so that I don't actually have water pooling up during rainstorms. But unfortunately, technology can only go so far, and AI technology has not fixed that problem yet. So this is another one, and this one seems like it's more aligned to it. But one of the things they pointed out is that there was a lot of issues with preferences. Okay, now it seems so very, very simple to say, look, we can actually divide or determine the most efficient route given the amount of routes that we have, the amount of drivers that we have, and what their number of people and where we have to pick them up at. But they started pointing out, it's like technology does not take into account kind of personal preferences and what the issues people would face. And one very compelling point is that if you kind of consolidate routes and say this is the most efficient route, that you're going to have some people that are going to be much worse off than others. Now let's just think about this intuitively, what that means. Has anybody taken a linear regression statistics class? Okay, so we talk about linear regression. Basically, we're trying to say, let's take a whole bunch of disparate observations. So I actually bought a marker for this, so let's see if I can do it. All right, so a bunch of disparate observations, and we're going to try to draw a line that best fits those observations. Okay. Now, this is basically what they're doing with the artificial intelligence. It's a lot more complex than this, but they're trying to find an optimal solution for a whole bunch of disparate positions, disparate locations. Does this mean this is a perfect solution? Perfect solution would say, stop here, stop here, stop here, stop here, stop here, stop here, stop here. But that would be what I just mapped out like 7 points, and they only want to do one stop because it would take a lot of time. So what ends up happening if I put a point right here? Well, this person, this person, this person, they're probably like, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's right next to my house. These people out here, that's like, I have to get up and walk for 30 minutes to get to my bus route. Okay, now we're talking about early in the morning, like leaving at 6 a.m. so they can get to class at 7:30 a.m. The bus route takes an hour long. How many parents are going to be okay with that? When it comes to parents in education, no parent's going to be okay with that. They're just like, they'll be okay. No, they're going to have a problem. The worst one was basically saying when there was inefficiencies in the routes and people didn't map it because problems arose during the process, and that the computerized system was not able to resolve and address this effectively. Did anybody catch the point of this? That some of the students were returning home at 10 p.m. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is the public school. Imagine like if we kept you on campus till 10 p.m. here. It's just kind of like say, no, I'm not taking evening classes, Dr. Barnes. That's it. Okay. I came to this school for a reason. It's like I'm done at like 3:30 or 4:30, something like that. Okay. So we're going to be staying till 10 p.m. today, guys. Is that okay? That's a bluff because I don't have 10 p.m. worth of material. Okay. Could teach the entire semester if we did it at 10 p.m. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm joking. I'm joking. All right. So yeah, there's a problem with adaptation, and this actually really leads to a really important conclusion. It's like that technology is great. Technology can do a lot of things that, it's a lot more potent than it used to be. But ultimately, when we talk about information systems, or we talk about this technology, the technology is only going to be as powerful as the individuals who use it. And so if we just leave technology to its own devices, it's going to do stuff like this and this, okay? It has to be updated with new preferences and new conditions. So what did we say when we talked about accounting information systems? I alluded to that in this course. I said, is accounting information systems just the hardware and software? What do you think the most important component of an accounting information system is? Give you hints what we all are. Well, people, email, yeah. We're all people, okay? The most important person is the people. If we don't have proper individuals actually running the information systems, running the ERPs, then it doesn't matter how complex the technology is. I can actually throw a really, really complex piece of technology at you. This will solve all your problems, but if you don't know how to utilize it effectively, it doesn't matter. Kind of like me with Brightspace, It's like if they sit me down and said, this is a perfect learning management system, it's so much better than Blackboard, I can say, well, this is great, but I don't know how to use it. And I've been slowly learning that, but my adaptation is slow in the upkeep. And so there's actually been hiccups. Now, to keep in mind, I'm a technology instructor. Even though I'm old, I actually pick up the stuff pretty quickly. So some of my colleagues, Brightspace is just kind of like, yeah, we're done. We are done here. I'm not going to mention any names, but I think that there's some instructors in the business, in the School of Business, and some in the other programs as well, who basically said, yep, I am not using that. I'm just not going to use the online platform at all. I see some nodding of heads. People say, yeah, I know who you're talking about, Dr. Barnes. So yeah, that's just an adaptation. It's tough to learn technology. And so keep in mind that if we're talking about updating technology, this is an impediment that occurs at all levels of every organization. There's going to be some point in your career where you're going to be working in business and they're going to say, we're actually implementing a new program here. And there's going to be so much resistance just simply because people do not want to learn something new, which is why I encourage you guys to be open to learning new things. All right, last one I want to talk about this IBM study. This is actually on goingconcern.com. This is actually my favorite blog. It's an accounting blog that I learned about back when I was working in public accounting in the 2000s. It's amazing to me because this was started up kind of as a startup blog, and it's had longevity. It's been around for like almost 20 years now. And it's very irreverent. If you're reading this stuff on there, so first of all, if you're an accounting major, become very well acquainted with that blog because it's got a lot of good information, and it's not filtered through the vein of we're going to make accounting look like the perfect job. Because I will tell you right now, being a public accountant, it's not the perfect job. At times there are times where you're going to be really stressed out and you're really tired, and it's good to know and have those expectations in advance. rather than walk into it and say, I'm really, really ego anticipating and have your hopes and dreams crushed right there. Okay. For those of you who are not in accounting, it's still kind of a good resource. You can kind of see some things in the business world. It tends to report with a very, very loose filter. By that, it means that they tend to drop some obscenities at times. You know, there's more than my fair share of F-bombs in there. And by F-bombs, I don't mean fun. Okay. But yeah, so I actually do this as a resource because I like having alternate points of view and looking at perspectives of people who used to work in industry but are now reporting on it. And this one is kind of an interesting one because they have a very loose sense of AI, and they try to report on things that are more open. Because when we talk about AI, when we talk about generative and artificial intelligence, the catchphrase for the technology companies is this is going to transform the world, and I don't disagree with that as a statement. I do think that this will transform the world to a degree, but I don't think it's going to be where everybody's worried that accountants are going to be automated robots and there's going to be no business positions. So for context, this type of a transition has been occurring throughout business and human history, right? If we go back to like the 1800s and we started talking about how did cotton used to be processed, it used to be a long and arduous process. And this gentleman named Eli Whitney said, okay, I can actually process cotton in a much more effective way. He invented the cotton gin. That's something, a little bit of trivia that everybody seems to know. Like Eli Whitney, he invented the cotton gin. It's like nobody knows what a cotton gin is, but I know he invented it. Okay. And so it was just a mechanized process that actually allowed them to do the work of a lot of individuals. Did that mean that there was no more work left to be done? Well, certainly there was plenty of work. It would just became there was more work, and
Because they needed to put more cotton because of the process.
yeah, well, so there was no longer a constraint. There was no longer a bottleneck on production, so they could actually do a lot of work. And that's kind of what we've seen in human history. Is everybody said, well, we're going to be replaced. It says no, we become more efficient in other areas, which means we can focus on bottlenecks that we have in other places. And so this is what the ultimate point of the article is saying is like, look, you are not going to be replaced, but you are going to have to adapt. And this is something that we were just joking about before. Remember, I was saying there's professors in the Truman State University that are saying, I'm not learning bright space. Okay. These are professors who are probably very close to retirement. If I tried to take that line, if I tried to say, well, I'm not learning bright space, then we're revoking your tenure, Dr. Barnes. I don't think they would do that, but they might. Okay. They might. So yeah, younger people can't get away with that. They're going to have to be adaptive and understand that they do that. And the good news is that you guys are on the ground floor because this change is going to be coming when you hit the business world, and it's going to be a constant rate of change. It's going to be so incredibly fast. There's a lot of things that are going to be a lot different, even just 5 years from now that we're learning. And so the ultimate point of this article was just to say, look, okay, what you're learning right now, it's not invaluable. I'm not saying that what I'm teaching you right now is completely and totally pointless, all right? But what I'm going to be saying to classes 5 years from now will be different, simply because the business environment will be different. And so anything that I say, I can't actually give you anything as gospel. I could actually be saying the words ERP systems right now, say enterprise resource planning systems, and those could be obsolete in 5 years from now because there's going to be no need for human involvement in this particular part of the process. Does that mean that there will be no need for human involvement? No, I mean, human involvement will always be necessary. I think the analogy that I gave, this was one I think that I gave if it wasn't this course, it was one of the other courses, but it's still a compelling analogy. It's going to McDonald's here in Kirksville, Missouri. Okay. Has anybody been to a McDonald's recently? The same may be true at other restaurants. I know it's not at Burger King because I do occasionally frequent Burger King. I have only been to McDonald's a couple times in Kirksville. I've never been to Taco Bell. You guys will hear me about Taco Bell. Like I know that's like a Taco Bell. You reach a certain age in your life where you can no longer digest Taco Bell food. Okay? I'm going to tell you right now, I used to love Taco Bell. I was like a Mexican pizza a few times a week. Okay. And then all of a sudden I hit a certain age and I said, I really want Taco Bell. And my body says, no, you don't. And I get it because it's cheap, it's salty, it's got tasty things in there. And Taco Bell is very good. It's basically everything that a college student wants. Is like, the price is right and the flavor's there that ultimately you're looking for. But yeah, you are going to hit a point in your life where you're going to be like, you're going to say, we can't do Taco Bell anymore. Okay. I hope it's much later in your lives than it was for me. Mine was like early 30s when I was kind of like, no, Taco Bell no more. I've had Taco Bell, I think maybe like a grand total of 5 times since I turned 30. And that was in protest. I was very, very heavily protesting those times I did it because I knew what the consequences were. All right, but that's really not relevant. That's really not a process. By the way, those of you who are accounting majors, you're going to hear me rant about Taco Bell again next time you're auditing with me because I do that again. But But like McDonald's, yeah,
It's gonna be the test.
maybe. The good news is that this is one of those things. There are certain things that you will forget about me saying. Like I'm going to teach you important concepts. Like I'm going to teach you the COSO framework and be like, okay, that's out the ear once it comes in, you know. But everybody will remember that Dr. Barnes doesn't like Taco Bell. Okay, you guys will remember that because it was so compelling. It's such a compelling story. I get texts from students all the time that talk to me, emails from students that talk to me. I remember you talked about this, and it's like it doesn't have anything to do with the education stuff. It was always a story that I told in class, you know, something like that. Which is why I teach in analogies, because then they're easy to remember. But McDonald's, okay, McDonald's. You go into McDonald's, and it used to be somebody would take your order, and I think they still have backup that, like, for people who don't want to use the computer screens, they have that. But we'll get to that in a second. But you actually punch your order on a screen, and that's trying to actually proxy human interaction for technology. And this is actually a sensible point of interaction for technology, because this is an area where there's a severe deficit of people who want to work that. Because first of all, the pay is not great. And you can actually find jobs that are actually higher paying that actually have the same skill set, even here in Kirksville, Missouri. Even here in Kirksville. It was 10 times worse during the pandemic. Some of the fast food places were offering $15 an hour, which if you said that in anywhere in the United States, is well, that should be minimum wage. But Kirksville, Missouri, like that's actually 50% increase above the per capita cost of living. If you actually do the research on statistics, per capita income in Kirksville, Missouri is around $20,000 a year. Okay, now you all are going to leave Kirksville, Missouri. Most of you will go elsewhere. Some of you may stay in this area, you know, like maybe living in this area. But regardless of whether you're here or elsewhere, you're going to have a much more successful career than most of the people who live in Kirksville. That being said, $15 an hour, if you do the math, it's about $30,000 a year. So that's a 50% increase on the per capita income in Kirksville, Missouri. So it kind of tells you there's a reason that we proxy this is because people cannot demand those of the restaurants. And speaking of Taco Bell, this is not a joke, this is actual realistic statement. During the pandemic, the managers of the Taco Bell in Kirksville were not willing to raise their wages for their employees. Okay. Now make a prediction. Every other fast food restaurant was raising wages for employees to work during the pandemic. Like some of these places were paying $15 an hour. Taco Bell said, no, you will pay what we give you, you'll be happy. What do you think happened? They quit, okay? Taco Bell closed down for multiple days at a time because they could not get people to come into work. And the times that they were working, there's actually another Facebook thread that talks about local talk in Kirksville. People were ranting and raving, says, I spent an hour in the Taco Bell drive-thru. Do you know why you spent an hour in the Taco Bell drive-thru? So there was one person working the entire restaurant. Yeah, or maybe two people, because I guess they can't open with one. So yeah, that kind of gives you context for that information. So this could be a proxy change. And the long-term prospects of this is that there's going to be technology that's going to be able to do even more of the labor tasks, like actually do the cooking. We're starting to see that now in other kitchens. We're starting to see automated kitchens that can actually do the work and can do it more effectively, because humans are susceptible to mistakes. Whereas if we actually have programming in the machines and the robotic processes do well, then they will do the same thing over and over again. And let's be honest, that's what we want from most of our fast food restaurants, is we want the same experience every single time. If you have a Mexican pizza, you want that Mexican pizza to do the same time every time you order it. If it's a little bit different, that's my problem. Sometimes I'll get a really good pizza from Domino's, and sometimes they'll be like, okay, whoever was making this obviously did not measure out the pepperoni, because there's like 3 pepperoni on this pizza. Okay, I'm not ranting against Domino's. Actually, I shouldn't say that. There used to be a Papa John's here in Kirksville. I wish there was still a Papa John's, but Domino's is a good second. It's a good alternative. Okay. Somebody can send this to Domino's and they're going to forever revoke my customer privileges there. They're going to say, here's what Dr. Barnes really thinks of you, Domino's. They say you're a second place. All right. So again, this makes sense in a labor intensive market. The question is, does it make sense in some of the business environments that we're talking about? Well, you guys have done some statistical analysis, probably done a data analytics class. Has anybody taken Dr. Ojha's a course from Dr. Ojha, done some of the database analysis? So that's one of those things that if we have technology that's programmed to do the work, that it will be doing a lot more efficiently than us moving tables and access. What's the issue with that? Just like the McDonald's, just like the Walmart that has the auto checkouts, just like what we're talking about, is that there's going to have to be some sort of human element that's going to have to be able to step in if there are problems. So if somebody does not want to use the customer or the computer interface at McDonald's, somebody's got to be there to take the order. If the machines are having problems in the back of the McDonald's restaurants making the burgers, somebody's gonna have to step in and say, I need to fix this problem so that it can continue moving forward. If we see the issues when you check out at Walmart, there's got to be somebody there who can resolve those problems. That's going to be true for what you guys are going to be doing in the real world with business, is that if there's a problem, if there's an issue with the way that the technology is operating, somebody's going to have to step in and fix the problem. And it's not something where you have to pull out a screwdriver and say, all right, I need to tighten this. We're talking about actually going into the program, going into the analytics and be able to say, all right, where was the hiccup? I need to fix the program right here. And it sounds like that's really foreign to you guys, because again, most of you are not programmers or computer scientists, but this will be an area that you will become a lot more well-versed as time goes by. All right, we are in 1420 on Friday. We're going to be doing our first Excel activity officially. Our homework assignment is also due on Friday. It's posted to Blackboard. Please make sure, real quick, on the assignments page, I'm just going to show you real quick because I had some questions about this. When you do the homework, that you click on this link right here, and I'll actually tell you, these are all the questions from the book that you'll need to do. I don't think the question came in here, but they just come in one of my other classes. People were not able to find the questions, so that's where the questions are. Again, it's not a particularly difficult assignment, should not take you a really long time, but we will walk through it on Friday. Have a wonderful Wednesday.